Hi, gang. Number one Marmaduke fan here. This is take two. I'm looking at the actual Rodger from Alterna Comics, art and story by Hank Tucker, the director of the Tick animated series. And this was one of the most pleasant surprises of the year. This is a very, very solid issue one. A lot of great character development, some funny and interesting things happen. Introduces characters, develops them, does things I just am so happy with, and it's all got its own unique flair to it. So one of my favorites of the year. This is also, I think, a master class in pacing a lot of interesting stuff and doing some foreshadowing, but actually making the first issue a real neat hook. So, title page kind of promises that we're going to see the actual Rodger, like this little regular kid, on some superhero adventures against some crazy, over-the-top villains. And the little pitch at the top says that Rodger is the sidekick for a hero who doesn't want him around. Well, that's weird. How come he's the sidekick if the superhero doesn't like him, right? So immediately you get hooked, and then you find out that Rodger doesn't like superheroes anymore. He's outgrown them. He wants to play basketball instead. And his best friend Clay, I'm not sure if Clay is autistic. Rodger's mom thinks Clay is autistic because he kind of has some unusual behaviors. He gets obsessed over superheroes, and he kind of gets violent when Rodger tells him he's not into superheroes anymore. So even though they're best friends, Clay seems to have some serious problems. And then some superheroic stuff happens, and Rodger gains the ability to fly a foot above the ground. And so far, that seems to be all he can do. For like subtle characterization, I really like how Rodger's mom and dad are handled. They're just kind of like a very simple like 1950s mom and dad, and the dad's got the pipe, and they worry about, Rodger, you're gonna get hurt. You might need a permit to fly around like that. And they do some really sweet stuff with them later. But as Rodger's, just kind of like flying around, goofing around with like the kid next door, she's kind of cute. I like this panel because the art style generally has this sort of Billy Batson vibe to it, but also mixes in maybe this modern flair. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Eric Larson, kind of. Kind of like, what would it be? Maybe like distorting the human body, but kind of making it look cool in its own way. And so the government shows up and kind of has this creepy scene where they say, people who get superhero powers, they're either a happy accident or an unhappy accident. And if you want Rodger to turn out to be a happy accident, then let us place him with a superhero. And there's this really emotional scene where the mom and dad come to grips with their son having to leave, but maybe he needs to in order to develop his power, right? And then the dad, I like this visual gag where the dad's pipe is in his coffee, because no one says, ha ha, your pipe's in your coffee. I just laugh because I pick it up. And they have like really normal down to earth parent things they worry about. Like they worry about Rodger, like not knowing what he wants to do in life. Last week he wants to be a race car driver. Next week he wants to be a Laker. Yeah, like even just like little things like Rodger just bonking his head because he's maybe being sleepy or just being goofy. And I really like this scene where they get a superhero outfit and Rodger hates it because he doesn't look like a big buff guy and he feels embarrassed. And so the dad just says, let the government guy scream, I'm a taxpayer. That's just great. It's great subtle characterization. And there's this really disturbing scene where Clay has a superpower. He can turn into clay and kind of morph like Clayface, but he can't quite control it, which means, he kind of can put himself back together, but it's really, really disturbing. The setup seems to be that maybe Clay's going to be a villain, like he has some other like he might have maybe his problems coping with his anger or something is going to be an issue, but that's saved for later. There's a really emotional scene where Rodger says goodbye to his dad, and they have I like this bit where this thought balloon comes out of his head because his power is he can read minds. I think Rodger is trying to imagine what that power looks like, so he imagines the thought cloud floating above his head. There's a lot of respect for the conventions of comics and the history of comics. So Magnanimo is kind of a Superman vibe guy. I like that he has a spit curl that's like a shark fin behind his head. And there's some really good subtle writing here where Rodger is going to be forced to be Magnanimo's sidekick because the government's decided it's marketable and that's part of their contract. So Magnanimo doesn't think he's particularly useful, or being able to float a little bit above the ground, he doesn't see what the point of that is. And there's this subtle silent gag where Rodger can't even fly up there and he struggles, right? So he's a protagonist with a problem. He's got a superpower, but it's kind of a useless superpower. What's he gonna do? And they have this conversation where, what Magnanimo kind of frankly tells him, I don't think you have a power set that'll let you fight crime. But there's this really subtle bit of writing where Magnanimo loves basketball and Rodger likes basketball, so they actually like click for a second, like, oh, they actually have a thing in common. And then the call comes in and they got to go off and fight crime. And again, Rodger is a behind the eight ball character, so you can't even like get out of that. Magnanimo puts his furniture on the ceiling, so he will always practice flying, so he doesn't lose his talent. And as Rodger tries to get out, he can't fly normally, so he just kind of like flops down in the background, which adds some visual comedy to the talking about the villain who's coming up, and then the pillow flops on him, and that's the end. So just great pacing. So this is a character development issue, right? We are introduced to Rodger, where he gets a superpower. We find out that Rodger's kind of behind the eight ball because he's not really ready to fight supervillains yet, but he's going to be forced to be this schmuck's sidekick. And even though like he's a bit of a Superman parody and that he's a bit full of himself, we get the feeling that maybe he can kind of be a good mentor or a good father figure for Rodger in this difficult situation. So that's a great setup. There's also action in that we see like, horrific transformation sequences and the effects of the powers. And we get some foreshadowing that maybe that's going to develop into something. I think it pays homage to like old school superheroes while making fun of aspects to them in a way that makes sense. Like it makes sense a skinny little kid wouldn't look good in a 1930s, superhero strongman, an underoos outfit. I like the handling of the drawing. It's funny. The characters are all unique, and they have kind of like this. It's just that mashup of an old school, Billy Batson cartoon style, but with some dynamic, fresh takes on these kinds of characters. And like the thing I'm always talking about, like low angles, high angles, the dad far away, the dad running in and surprised underneath as the helicopters fly over, right? That kind of fun stuff, like this panel of the meteorite coming down and going straight through three leaves. Wonder if that's going to be important. All right, so the actual Rodger, one of the most pleasant surprises of the year for me. I will definitely be looking for more of it. Genuinely funny. I laughed several times. A lot of the comedy comes from the situation and the personalities bouncing off each other, not just like, hey, let's allude to something in pop culture. Unique, fresh art style with a lot of love for kooky, crazy superheroes of yore, but also some good character development. So wonderful. Alterna Comics is the best. I'm #1 Marmaduke fan. If you like this video, why don't you like, comment, subscribe, click the bell to receive notifications. Make sure you're still subscribed because YouTube, the robots delete subscriptions sometimes. Check out my subscribe star. It's the best way to support this channel. I thank my subscribers at the end of every video. Thanks to everyone for super chat donations. And is that everything? Just check the description below for links to everything. Love you. Catch you later.